Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the TelcoBridges Podcast. My name is Maximilien, and I'm the CEO of TelcoBridges. We're joined once again by Morissette, our VP of Client Technical Services. The topic for today's discussion is the increasing complexity of voice network infrastructure, what that means for service providers, and how vendors are responding. So, Luc, people don't appreciate how difficult it is to manage voice network infrastructure. Can you tell us a little bit about why they feel so complex?
It's a big network, right? Voice is a lot of things, a lot of components. There is like the basic protocols is one thing. It's not all of it. There is all the glue to put them together, so different components. And then there is stuff that you must do outside, like billing, reporting. And then there's different vendors that do these things. You could have the same vendor that does everything, and sometimes this is acceptable, sometimes it's quite expensive. And then you have optimized solution for each of these elements, where then you need to become knowledgeable of each one of those elements.
Right. It can be pretty complex. The framework I like to use is this OSS BSS framework. So there's the operating side and the network side, which is the OSS side. And then there's the business side, the BSS side. And there's basically a proliferation of tasks and functions and elements that need to be managed on each of those sides. So I wanted to focus today's discussion on three key elements that contribute to voice network kind of infrastructure complexity. So the first one is this concept of network engineers retiring. So I was reading a report recently, something like 25% of voice network engineers are expected to retire in the next 5 years. That puts pressure on kind of that OSS side of the house. Is that something you've kind of seen recently? Are people talking about?
Absolutely. We're on calls with customers every day, me and my team. And it's not rare that we have someone that says, I'm retiring next month, next year, and or they just disappear at some point. You send the emails and then suddenly, oops, it's gone. It was replaced by someone else because he left and returned. It happens all the time. Yeah.
Right. And then obviously, as people move on, the amount of expertise internally, expertise for, on how to use a lot of these systems, whether it's software, hardware, becomes smaller and smaller within that kind of service provider's in-house expertise, right?
Yeah, correct. So some of this knowledge is maybe not necessary anymore because these equipments are not used, they're decommissioned. But then there's also core stuff that are still needs to be maintained and understood and programmed and troubleshoot. If you don't know how to use that, it's difficult. So you try to transfer the knowledge to the new team members, the colleagues, but you can't pass everything necessarily.
One of the what makes this difficult, and what I know I've kind of learned recently, is how long it can take to become an expert user for some of these systems, right? So these aren't like web applications, or it's not a CRM, it's something completely different, way more complex. It has its own language, its own acronyms, and you basically need to retrain yourself on each different vendor with each different system, right?
Correct. There's market acronyms, of course, but then if you go just one step deeper, you have all these protocols, all these interfaces for each equipment, different interface, different protocol. It's difficult to become an expert in all of these. Yeah.
And so it's not uncommon for, one or two people or one person to be trained on a system. And if that person chooses to move on, then all of a sudden there's an important knowledge gap within the organization.
It's always a challenge that we have the same issues on our side. So we have to have at least one super expert and then another expert that backs him, and then anybody else can do some of the work, right? So and if that's for each protocol, each type of device, each equipment, so it's a challenge.
Right. So staff expertise. Okay, that was really helpful. The second big reason for kind of increasing voice network infrastructure complexity is this notion of voice effectively being I don't want to say an afterthought, but second to data in people's networks and in people's kind of product offering in the service provider space, right? So voice used to be the main product for the telecom space. Today, the main product is data. Even as voice is now primarily on IP, I think, 1% of data is of packets or voice packets, and 99% are data packets.
Yeah, it's probably something like that. The data and application, the services, they're just booming incredibly. Voice is like stable, right? So you just need one person needs only one voice call, right? Doesn't need to have all these applications and stuff like that. But the voice specifically, when we talk about voice, it's not only voice, right? It's also, we sometimes we hear about fax. Yeah, okay, fax it's still being used in the networks and still need to have that. And then there's modem calls, which have all kinds of application. One of them is credit cards, right? Paying at the store with a credit card. A lot of them are still on modem calls. They're going through the TDM or SIP lines, right? The like basic lines, subscriber lines. And then there's, yesterday I was talking to you about that earlier today, a pacemaker, which needs to do a modem call to report what's going on, right? So these services are there. There's some I know there's some encryption, secured lines, which are running over modems, right? So it's not only voice, it's all of these applications.
And I mean, this applies for internet service providers and managed service providers. Like voice is no longer the main, or is rarely the main product. It's the secondary product. It's important to get right. It contributes to customer stickiness, and you want to reduce overall churn, but it's no longer the main kind of revenue generating side of the business. And so you translate that impact on the business side to looking at your infrastructure and, again, your internal expertise, the number of vendors that you need to learn how to use their systems and make sure everything's working correctly. And you start to say, okay, well, starts to be pretty complex for what I'm getting on the business side, perhaps.
But you still need it, right?
Yeah.
So
911 is, of course, the obvious example of it being critically important, but not a big driver of traffic.
It never has a lot of traffic. You hope it never has a lot of traffic, but yeah, you need to have it all the time.
The other part of voice that's tricky is it's the regulated part of all of this, right? So 911 is part of that. I mean, it's because it's a critical service, because it's a utility, a lot of rules around it. A lot of times that means FCC reporting, right? All of a sudden you have regulators. You have to stay on top of different rules. Rules change all the time. We've talked about it on this podcast. And so there's a lot to stay on top of when you're in the voice space and as a voice provider, even though voice is no longer like your main business necessarily. So that was number 2 in terms of the 3 reasons why we're, seeing complexity of voice infrastructure seemingly increase. The third is vendor proliferation. Fraud, regulatory reporting, billing, user management, UCaaS, class 5 soft switch, session border controllers. There's just a host of elements you need in your voice network to get it right. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So we always know billing is something super important, right? It's separate equipment, separate software. You need the reporting on those billing. Customers will complain, time bills, stuff like that. So you need to have all of these. Then you have the core switching, which you get your calls come in. You need to make sure your 911 calls are routed correctly, optimized. You need to have your caller names, your dipping, local number portability dipping, all these things. So this is another part. The other part is maybe the what we mentioned, monitoring of all of these systems, right? So each equipment may be doing different things. different things you want to monitor, is make sure everything is up. If you have calls that are being dropped, you need to know why they're not accepted in the network. You're interconnecting with new carriers, new systems, so you need to make sure all of these work all the time.
So it's not uncommon to have 12 different vendors, or it's like measured in the dozens in terms of having like vendors and software within kind of your infrastructure.
Some of them are commercial. Some of them can be open source, which does exactly what you want, but you still need to integrate it, maybe compile it, install it on a server, maintain it. So it's a lot of work, a lot of equipment, different protocols, different equipment.
That's true. There is a buy versus build type of decision that happens fairly early on, and there is a robust open source community around it.
Yeah. Some things are really, really good open source. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Luc. That was helpful. So to recap, there's 3 things we've observed. The first is network engineers retiring, right? So that creates kind of a talent gap. The second is voice naturally becoming a secondary product or business contributor relative to data. So data is now where a lot of the CapEx and the attention is. Voice is also kind of the regulated side. So it's the hairy side without being the major revenue contributor. And the third source of kind of network infrastructure complexity is just vendor proliferation, just the sheer number of kind of functions and elements and different systems you have to get up to speed on to stand up a voice network. And so where does that leave us today? Can you talk a little bit about the 2 models that vendors are basically pursuing and how that relates to service providers?
Sure. So you have the more like vertical type of integration, where then you have one vendor providing all the services or the solutions, right, to build a big solution. These usually come to be a bit expensive, right? Which is okay for some cases, but maybe not for all cases, right? The other way to do it is to patch up with things that you find, which are optimized solution for billing, optimized solution for fraud protection, optimized solution for this, right? And you bring all of them together, but then you have different vendors, maybe different types of environment, infrastructure. So you need to manage all of these things.
Right. So the one vendor, one throat to choke, perhaps more expensive just because it's kind of like uniform, or there's the selecting kind of your vendor of choice in different kind of functions and different areas of expertise. But then the trade-off there is more to manage potentially. And so how have vendors evolved in the latter example? Because we experienced some of that, and then we started to have customers kind of ask us for specific things. Is that right?
Well, I would say most of our customers are okay with managing themselves our products because they are relatively easy, and it's not it's usually not the most complicated segment of the whole networks, right? But we have customers that don't want to spend the time to learn in details these things because some of the functions are commodity. So if you use only the commodity, then you don't need to become an expert there. Maybe you can just do that. But then again, if you want to add features, then we can help to manage that, right? And add these features to the system.
And so to be clear, a managed service in our case means you and your team would be responsible for the installation, the ongoing monitoring, jumping in to make changes. Is that right?
Yes and no. Meaning that customers can choose which part they want to do themselves. If they want to install it themselves, that's fine. If they want to configure the first, fine. But if they want us to do it, we can do that with them or on our side. Of course, we need the instructions, right, to be able to do that. The monitoring, well, usually it's us that does it. So we have a monitoring system that we can install to verify everything if it's working. All the equipment. So it's pretty much open. But so some of the things we would do, for example, if we want to add a fraud protection system, well, we know how to do that. It's much easier if we do it. But then the maintenance of that fraud protection system could be done by the customer.
Right. And so one of the key benefits is that they don't need to become experts for this element of their network, they can focus their attention elsewhere, and basically rely on you and your team for some of that expertise, right?
Absolutely right, especially for troubleshooting. And then they usually what we do is that our customers, there are some things they like to do themselves. Like some of them, it's changing the routing. They need to change the routing all the time. And so we make sure they understand how to do that, and they do the routing changes. But we can do anything else that is out of that scope, right? And then complete with our expertise.
Got it. And I've heard from customers that there's a significant peace of mind element to knowing that there's someone else kind of in charge of the system if something goes wrong as far as their session border controller goes, right? So you don't need to have multiple people that know how to use it and coverage for someone being on vacation, for example, that's kind of inherent in the value prop of a managed service session border controller.
Yes. So if I step back on what you said just a little bit, it's first is stability, right? We want to make sure that this works in all scenarios in a normal way. When we get there, then after that it's just monitoring, right? If something strange happens, and sometimes it's a power failure, sometimes it's thunderstorms, right? So all kinds of things we see at customer sites. And then there's something that needs to be done. So we're there. We have a 24/7 team all around the world. So we can cover all the time zones, and we can jump in on the system and do everything we can to fix those problems. Right?
So Luc, what else do we do for customers as part of ProSBC Managed Service?
So what we do is, we mentioned monitoring before. Monitoring is very important because you can verify everything that is in the system. And then we get informed of anything that goes wrong. We can quickly jump on the system and figure out what are the problems. The customers also get informed at the same time as us. So they can also inform that, okay, we're doing a maintenance. So don't take care of those events that you will get at this time. There's the upgrades. So if ever we need to go to a new version, so we can do this upgrade. Either the customer tells us, okay, you do it, and we just go on and do it. Or they say, most of the time, they say, well, we'll do it together. You do it, and I'll just be there to verify. Because usually when we upgrade, we just want to verify all the calls are still passing. So you need to make a few test calls and check in the system. Then it's a lot of it is like installing new solutions, like the fraud protection I mentioned, but there's also all kinds of solutions. We're coming out with a DNO solution now that we can just install on any system that is there. We just go in and install it and then test it with our customers that have these managed services. We can do that. So it's pretty open on everything we want to do with them. Right.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And that's what I was referring to earlier on the peace of mind vacation piece. I mean, the fact that kind of you and your team receive the notifications directly for the managed service customers, and you guys can kind of jump in and make changes. That's a big part of the peace of mind that the service offers.
And for example, one thing we have done is that one of our customers decided between like 1 and 4 a.m., don't bother me, right? So then we receive the alerts, but they don't, right? And if ever we find it's a real serious problem, then we contact them directly. But yeah, so all of these are possible. Yeah.
Got it. Well, Luc, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the TelcoBridges Podcast. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. And for those of you interested in learning more about ProSBC Managed Service, please visit our website. Thanks for listening.